guys, so this is what if My Hero Academia was being human, or was like being human. Now, if you don't know what being human is, I don't know what to say. You're not probably into supernatural stuff. Basically, being human, if you don't know what it is a TV show. It's a U.S. version, UK version, and I think another one. But the U.S. version, I recommend to see that first because it has better acting and better effects and a better story actually, and like everything. So yeah, also better people because like originally the werewolf in the UK version was so wimpy to a point where I didn't even like him. So yeah, but this is what if Deku wasn't being human, but mainly gonna be one of My Academia was being human or supernatural or lived in a supernatural world. Now, it's gonna be about a couple races or a couple species of people in this world. Now, it's the main supernaturals like um, werewolves, vampires, witches, those, but also quirk people exist as well, and also humans. But most humans are turned into vampires or werewolves or quirked. Now, basically, people with quirks can be turned into a werewolf or a vampire, and they still have their quirks as they turn. But most werewolves, if their parents have quirks, they get quirks as well, but with the werewolf gene as well. But either one is going to be watered down to to balance the power of the world. So, like, if the person has very strong werewolf powers, their quirk is weak. They have a very strong quirk, their werewolf powers are weak. You know, the 50-50. Now, what am I gonna do? I was originally gonna make Deku into a werewolf, but I thought, I already did that, and I just want to do something new. And also, I got a recommendation from on one of my friends on Discord, so I did it. So basically, Deku's gonna be a slime instead of a werewolf or a vampire. Basically, gonna be a slime. Now, basically, guys, this video is gonna be maybe pretty long. So if like a snacky person when you watch a long video, get some snacks, a drink, something. So let's lay down and just chill and listen. So guys, let's get started. What if My Hero Academia was being human? Now, basically, we start our story off with we start our story off about 5,000 years in the past, where supernaturals were a thing. Now, we start our story off with basically Dracula, Silverback. In this universe, Silverback's like the Dracula of werewolves. Basically, Dracula and pretty much Silverback were talking about a ritual. This ritual was to seal away a demon that was so powerful that it could kill werewolves and vampires, the whole species, in just one foul move if it became too strong. So for it to be locked away and its powers to be permanently watered down so they could never get as strong. And they did succeed on that. But they accidentally shipped it or merged it with the vase containing the child of the most powerful slime in the world. Now, slimes are immortal because technically, they don't really die of natural causes. They can live for thousands of years, and the older the slime is, the stronger it is, and it doesn't matter if it has train, it just matters if it's old. And also, slimes don't really get an age or a sex if they, or a gender if they aren't given one. So they basically choose their gender. Basically, we start our story off with Deku. Now, this demon was a female demon, and she would actually be the ship. Basically, her human form looked like, what was it? The girl from DxD anime. Don't know what it's called. Eri? No. Man, I forgot her name. I actually forgot her name. I think it was. I don't remember her name, but like if you know her name, comment down below. Now let's get started. Now basically Deku would be at this point locked up in a very powerful vase to keep his energy away, so his father could teach him. His father was on a very long trip to basically meet other slimes and link up the kingdoms. Now, Deku was accidentally switched, and they put the demon in the vase Deku was in, trapping them into an infinite void of space for eternity. Now, when they found out, they switched it, and the demon was stuck in there with the slime, they were relieved because the slime's father did say he's okay, because slimes are fireproof, and I was a fire demon, and also he's mainly intangible, so there's no way it can kill him. So basically, they start, making a ritual to try to let out Deku, but not the demon. But it's too risky, and Dracula shuts it down, saying it's too risky, and it can kill all species. The slime says, all species, you mean just yourself. Dracula gets angry and says, you better not say that again, you little slime, and basically, they stop. Now in this world, slimes are the lowest of the food chain. Now, basically, before slimes became sentient or had, a thinking, they were basically cattle, and they were some slimes, normal slimes, green normal slimes, were actually eaten for sport because they tasted like, heaven. They tasted really good, like perfection of Jello. So basically, most people killed slimes, but most slimes became sentient and evolved and became stronger. And pretty much the supernatural world was afraid of this, so they locked down pretty much slimes and tortured them, making them feel powerless. And that they did that kind of like werewolves. They kind of did that to werewolves as well, because vampires think of themselves in this world as the strongest, the best, and the better than werewolves, and slimes, and witches, and all sorts of other supernaturals. Now, the only supernaturals are witches, vampires, werewolves, slimes, and quirk people. Also, it's gonna be Also, warlocks are gonna be a thing. So yeah, let's get into it. Basically, or hybrids, like people with quirks that are supernatural, like that. So basically, Deku is in the vase, or in the vase, trapped into the demon for thousands of years. And over the years, Deku basically becomes friends with the demon. The demon says, at first, I'm going to kill you by burning you alive. She tries for about a couple hundred years, and nothing happens. Basically, she sleeps on Deku because, he's straight up a pillow, because he's still in the slime form, because he hasn't chosen a body to replicate or a sex. So basically, she just straight up, became friends with Deku. And over the years, they became more and more, tighter, like best of friends. Now, basically, at first, Deku was kind of scared, but started to warm up, and she taught Deku a couple things about humanity that she knew at that time. But while they were in there, time moved way faster than they thought in the real world. Now, in their perspective, they were there for like about thousands of years, but it was pretty much no, they were there for hundreds of years. Now, when they get out, it'll be thousands of years, and we skip to present day, and we switch over to Bakugo's story. Now, Bakugo would be the distant relative of Dracula. Now vampires in this world can have children, but they can only have two, and that's basically it. So, vampires can only have two children, and most time, vampires, when they mate with pretty much, when they mate with humans or quirk people actually mess up the vampire's DNA, basically letting the vampire have more children, but it's a 50-50 chance. The children can come out as vampires completely or quirk people completely. So there's no, basically merge. So the only way a vampire can have a quirk and vampire powers is if they're turned as they're born quirked. So yeah. So basically, Todoroki's mom would give birth to Dabi. Now Dabi will be a vampire, not a quirk user, but he will be able to learn fire magic, because any supernatural creature can learn magic in this world. But mainly witches and warlocks are the best at it. So basically, we start our journey with Bakugo. Now Bakugo will be the distant relative or the main blood relative, like the great 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 grandson of Dracula, basically being very powerful like he was in canon because, he thinks of himself as higher than everybody else because he's the great, great, 1,000 other great grandson of Dracula, the strongest vampire to ever live, and the only vampire that was strong enough to take down or to semi-defeat Silverback, and Silverback was the strongest werewolf. Now, Silverback will actually be, what was it? Kirishima's great great grandfather, great 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 great, a couple 100,000 greats grandfather, because werewolves don't live forever. In this world, werewolves live as long as humans, plus the lifespan of a wolf. So yeah. So basically, Kirishima. Oh, Kirishima would basically be best friends with Bakugo. Now, Bakugo, when growing up, he would become friends with Shigaraki. One day, when Shigaraki was getting bullied by a group of stronger werewolves or older werewolves, basically Bakugo stepped in and saying, "Leave him alone." Bakugo, not knowing that Kirishima was a vampire. I mean, wasn't a vampire because he thought he was a vampire. So, Bakugo, since he's the great great grandson of Dracula, he is stronger than normal vampires, way stronger. So he was able to take down, you know, the other vampires and the other werewolves and get them away from Kirishima. He became friends with Kirishima, and then they eventually, Bakugo eventually found out Kirishima was a werewolf, but that didn't change their friendship, and they became friends. Now, was now basically their story will intertwine with letting go or unlocking Deku. Now, in this world, it's a lot of laws put in place for supernaturals. Now, basically, supernaturals do have laws. Now, the government implies or gives, pretty much registered vampires canned blood. Now, this canned blood is making vampires a lot weaker, like werewolves get weaker. Because werewolves, when after a full moon, they're very weak, about the same strength as a normal human being without a quirk. Now, basically, Bakugo would be weak, but be as strong as a full powered up vampire that was on full blood, because he would be still have that Dracula blood in his veins. So he would be pretty strong even without drinking real blood. Now, this fake blood that the government gives to every vampire or every registered vampire, is like vending machines, stores, houses, and they even give them to people or vampires on the streets just because they don't want them to go out of control and start killing people. But most vampires, about 5% of vampire population, do go off the rails and actually kill people because fresh blood makes vampires stronger, powerful, and better. Now, Dracula is actually a part of this team, but he's way too high and mighty and powerful and has the police pretty much wrapped around his finger. Basically, all of his relatives, all of Dracula's relatives, basically having tons of money because, they're Dracula's relatives. And Dracula has a lot of riches and gold, but up for the thousands of years he's been alive. So, Dracula would basically be drinking human blood, but wouldn't be able to get caught. So, yeah. And even if he did get caught, the person that caught him would die, or they would get bribed by Dracula not to say anything. Now, basically, when Bakugo, Kirishima's, and Deku's story intertwine, it's the night of the full moon. The third full moon Kirishima's ever been in. Now, basically, Kirishima's been turning for about a couple years, because a werewolf first turns, a born werewolf first turns when they're about 13. So, Kirishima has been transforming for a long time. Now, Kirishima pretty much has a plan to actually go out and run wild, because most werewolves under a full moon are taken to a area to lock themselves up so they don't hurt anybody, or most werewolves have cages in their own houses so they can lock themselves up and transform safely and not hurt anybody. Now, some werewolves are strong enough to control their wolf form, but younger werewolves, like Kirishima, aren't able to control them. Now, basically, Kirishima said, I want to transform rapidly and go around the, forest because mainly werewolves are supposed to run wild, and that's how they get their wolf form, get their wolf form sustenance or strength and make them stronger. So Kirishima tells Bakugo we have to go out and just to keep my extra pair of clothes ready for me so I can, when I transform back in the morning, you can give them back to me. So in this universe, it's kind of like Vampire Diaries. Basically, werewolf bites can instantly kill a vampire. Now, it's not instantly, but it is a very painful death. Now, a vampire dies in the span of 2 hours when they get bit by a werewolf. And the only cure to a werewolf bite on a vampire is hybrid blood. But hybrid blood is super rare because mostly vampires or werewolves never mate. Never. So, it's very, very rare to find a hybrid. And even if a hybrid was found, the government would harvest its blood so they can make an antidote. But most hybrids keep their powers under check and never really expose themselves to the world. Now, basically, Bakugo would have a pair of clothes and some food if Kirishima doesn't eat on full moon, ready for him when he transforms in the morning. The full moon hits, and Kirishima starts changing in the middle of the forest. And Bakugo instantly starts sprinting, pretty much trying to get away as fast as possible, not trying to get bit because he doesn't want to die. So Bakugo starts sprinting off, and Kirishima starts transforming. His bones rearranging and his body breaking and pretty much fixing itself again and again and again, eventually him transforming into a werewolf. Now, some werewolf forms can merge with the quirk, giving the werewolf a correct werewolf form. Now, basically, Kirishima's werewolf form is just bulletproof. That's basically the only thing that makes it different from werewolf. So his fur is bulletproof, but its eyes and inside of his body isn't. It's just as normal as a werewolf. But also, they can regenerate as well. Not limbs, but heal from bullets. The only thing that can go through Kirishima's, bulletproof wolf form is a silver bullet or a gold bullet. So yeah. So basically, Kirishima starts running around the forest, taking down deers, and eventually pretty much being lured into the city, seeing 2 cops on patrol for, rogue werewolves on the full moon. Basically, these people having strong quirks so they can defend themselves. One of them having some sort of telekinesis quirk, and another one having some sort of danger quirk that can allow them to feel danger like Spider-Man, like the Spider Sense. So, basically, they start talking, eating donuts, pretty much, talking about their families, all that other stuff. And out of nowhere, they hear a huge growl. They look up and they see 2 eyes in the trees and start shooting at it, but it starts running off into the trees, jumping left and right, then eventually pouncing on one of the cops, the telekinesis quirk guy, basically him pushing off Kirishima, but Kirishima grabbing him before he can, push him away for good, and Kirishima ripping his head off. Kirishima runs towards the other cop, the cop being able to save itself, pretty much it jumping into his car and locking the doors. Kirishima tries to bust into it, but eventually some sort of museum truck drives by. Kirishima gets pretty much mesmerized with that because it has some sort of pretty much a lighting on it, and Kirishima starts running after it with ferocity, trying to catch it. Kirishima bumps into the back of it, making it fly into a ditch. Kirishima pretty much killing the drivers and pretty much running off. Kirishima starts running off, and Bakugo's watching the whole thing from the roofs, having Kirishima's stuff in hand. Now, later that night, All Might shows up and takes down Kirishima, because Kirishima was the only werewolf in Japan that went rogue that night. Now, All Might's a hybrid. All Might's a hybrid of a quirk person, a vampire, and a werewolf. Now, All Might was born a werewolf. All Might was born a quirk person, then turned by a werewolf, and then turned by a vampire. Now, it was 50-50. Hybrids are tricky to make. Basically, they have to find a human were a quirk person, closest thing to a human, and basically turned them into a vampire and a werewolf, biting them, also giving them vampire blood, and making them see what happened. Now it's 50-50. They can instantly die, or they can become hybrids. But most of the time, they don't want to take that risk, and most hybrids are failed and just die. But All Might was the exception. All Might actually accidentally became a hybrid when he was bit one night, on his first day of becoming a quirk hero. Also, after he became a quirk werewolf hybrid, he also got turned and captured by All For One. All For One would have a quirk, but also be turned to a vampire by Dracula. Man, this is when Dracula was like way younger. So basically, All For One. No, what was it? All For One was one of the first quirk people, one of the first strongest quirk people, and he was turned by Dracula. So that's how he has a vampire immortality, strength, and also a couple other quirks with his quirk. So basically, All Might starts straight up just folding Kirishima, trying to break him out of his wolf form. Because if he had a werewolf hard enough, and fast enough, they can't get knocked out of their wolf form with enough force. And Kirishima does gets the socks knocked off of him. Him getting faded pretty much in an alleyway that night by All Might. All Might puts him into custody, giving him pretty much jury duty, all in pretty much him not going to jail, but him having to do government service, or like, what was it? Pretty much him having to clean up littering and all that other stuff. So him not really being severely punished, but his parents, straight up being angry at Kirishima. Now, that night, when Kirishima pretty much threw the truck in the ditch, and this is Deku's story, the vase that was holding the demon and Deku were in there, and they were a very valuable part of the museum truck. A couple other antique swords and mummies were broken as well, but the vase was broken in half, and the demon and Deku was released. The demon flew away, forgetting about Deku the second that it got free from the vase and flying off. Deku's swamping around, pretty much him falling into the ditch's water. Deku absorbing the ditch's water, but also purifying it, becoming bigger. Deku saw a young boy in the distance, pretty much the young boy being a injured teenager that would become pretty much, this universe's Deku. Basically, this wasn't Deku, it just was a kid that looked exactly like Deku. So basically, Deku looked at the kid's body and replicated it, but him giving himself blue hair, blue eyes, and making himself a lot more taller than the kid. Not a lot taller, but probably like a 3 inches taller. So pretty much, Deku looked at the kid. Deku not knowing the sex, so basically Deku was just genderless. He just had the body of the kid. He didn't have a sex. He just had the body. Didn't have anything down there. So Deku looked at the kid more and more, and the kid died then and there. The kid was thrown into pretty much a tree by Kirishima. So the kid basically, died. And Deku did look a little bit different from the kid, because he had glossy or glycerine, bright, glowing blue hair and blue eyes, and also he was taller than the kid. So basically, Deku buried the kid, and pretty much him actually absorbing some of his DNA by eating some of his hair, because slimes can pretty much take people's powers or their abilities by absorbing their DNA, or replicate people's powers. So this kid was actually a vampire, and he did fall into pretty much a branch into the tree, it being enough to kill him because it was wood. So Deku had sorry. Actually, the kid wasn't a vampire, it was a werewolf. The kid was a werewolf, but the kid was a newly turned werewolf, because when it was scratched by Kirishima, it was technically turned. So Deku absorbed the vampire bite. The werewolf bite. Him being able to one-shot any vampire by one bite or one claw scratch. Now Deku walked off, looking around the world, and eventually wandering across a cabin in the middle of the woods. This cabin was kind of broken down, but looked like it was broken into. At this point, it was like the morning because Deku walked around for a pretty long time. Deku walked off, but the water that Deku took in, he used a lot of it to actually walk around, so he did, waste a couple of energy, so he was back into a slime state. His, just a little slime state. So he started bouncing up the stairs into the house and looked around and saw pretty much mess, but it was kind of decent. So he started walking around, seeing some blood prints on the walls, and pretty much him making some noise. And we switched to pretty much Dobby. Dobby was at the basement, pretty much feeding off of some sort of person he found at nighttime. Pretty much him taking some blood. So about Kirishima, no, sorry, Dobby thinks that's some sort of, well, other person or human that he can feed on. So he immediately runs upstairs, but stops when he, sees some sunspots or sun pretty much beams going into his house. Him avoiding it, eventually him stopping, seeing some sort of slimy thing on the ground. Kirishi pretty much Dobby steps back and says a slime. Now in this world, slimes were portrayed in the folklores as, very powerful because slimes actually went a rebellion against werewolves and vampires, and basically was on a straight up war, and 50% of the slime population was completely killed off. So slimes are pretty rare, like really rare in Japan and America. Other places, they were dead in there. So basically, Dobby looked closer and closer to Deku, and Deku looked at him, said, "What's wrong?" Deku started, talking to Dobby, and Dobby said, "Nothing's wrong, little slime boy." Him walking off, avoiding some of the sunbeams, and grabbing a bin of pretty much vampire shades. Now, vampire shades in this world are kind of like the cheap version of daylight rings. They work for about 2 hours, and then they're useless, and you gotta get another pair. They're basically like training daylight rings. So when you're 10 and you're a vampire, you get your first daylight ring. But for the rest of your life, all the way up till you're 9, you live in the dark and you don't touch the sun. So yeah, so basically, Dobby put on these shades because Dobby was a rogue vampire. He drank human blood and he was a killer. They didn't know Dobby's face for sure because Dobby mostly compelled police to forget about him and about his face. It also erased the memories of him in their face. So witches with some sort of mind control magic couldn't find out, Dobby's face. So Dobby was basically a ghost, and Dobby took a lot of people out every night for blood. So Dobby pretty much put on his daylight shades and said, "So, why are you here, slime boy?" Pretty much poking Deku, and Deku being kind of angry, taking the tip of Dobby's finger off. Dobby yells out in pain and says, "What was that for?" Pretty much him saying, "I expressed me with DNA," saying what you are. "You're a vampire, aren't you?" Dobby says, "Yeah, I am." Him regenerating his finger using a lot of, blood that he just drank to regenerate it back. So Dobby says, "Don't ever do that again, slime boy, and also, why are you even here?" He says, "I just got freed by a tomb that was in for thousands of years." Oh, what time is it? Or what year is it? Pretty much, Dobby says it's in 2019. Pretty much, Deku saying it's been that long. Pretty much, Dobby is told by Deku what year he was born, and Dobby says, "You're that old of a slime?" Jeez. Basically, Deku saying, "So, what's the world like now?" Dobby says, "It's a lot different than when you were born, little boy." Deku says, "Little boy, I'm older than you, and probably older than your father." Dobby says, "Don't talk about my father. He was a jerk, and I never want to hear about his name ever again." Dobby pretty much walks off, looking around, and pretty much him seeing the slime guy still in his house. Dobby walks back into his house, opening the door, seeing Deku absorbing eating all of his daylight shades. Dobby gets angry and says, "Why are you eating those for? I only have 2 hours left of daylight walking. I can't just go around in the shades. Pretty much, Deku says daylight shades. Sorry guys. Now let's get back into the story. Basically, Deku would be saying daylight shades. Basically, Deku, Dabi explain more about, daylight rings, daylight shades, and all sorts of other stuff. How daylight shades are like the bootleg version of daylight rings. Basically, Deku says daylight ring and starts absorbing and rearranging all the shades, making a daylight ring. A bland daylight ring that would be like just a silver ring with a black rim around it. So Dabi said a daylight ring, putting it on, taking the shades off, and walking out, saying it works. Deku saying, yeah, of course it works. I made it. Dabi says, you're pretty, useful, slime boy, saying, follow me. Him walking off into the city. Dabi starts walking down the street with Deku, pretty much him walking, more and more. Him smelling a certain scent. Him smelling Bakugo. Now, Bakugo, Dabi, Todoroki, and, what was it? Kirishima all met as children, and they were separated when Dabi became a rogue vampire, and his first time with Dabi drinking blood will be explained a little on. Basically, Dabi walking and disappearing vampire style, Deku being confused. Deku still in slime form, pretty much smelling, Dabi's scent, tracking him jumping into the bushes, trying to keep a low profile. Him knowing about everything, about, slimes being hated, or, like, being super rare, or, like, something like that. So Bakugo did see Dabi, but blinked his eyes for a second and Dabi was gone. Bakugo crossed the street looking for Dabi, seeing nothing. Now we skip back to Dabi on top of a roof, seeing Bakugo. Bakugo looks at the roof that Dabi was at, but Dabi ducks and Bakugo's confused where Dabi is. Dabi is told by Deku, why are you hiding? And, I looked in some of your memories, and he seems to be a friend. Dabi says, stay on my memories, you little punk. Pretty much Dabi getting up and saying, okay. And pretty much him getting a phone call from Shigaraki. Now, in this universe, Shigaraki will be a warlock, and pretty much him mastering decaying magic. Dabi will get called by Shigaraki that is going to be a huge house party with a bunch of humans, court people, in the right time to grab people and feast on them. Pretty much, Dabi saying, well, thank you. Pretty much him hanging up the phone saying, let's go. Or you could just stay here. Him pretty much super swinging across roof to roof. And pretty much Deku following him, jumping to roof, sliming. Him eventually getting to the house party, and this house party would actually be hosted by Kirishima. Kirishima would have, a party with Bakugo, and this would be a party a couple weeks after jury duty from, basically Kirishima. Kirishima will be throwing a house party after his parents leave for a little business trip. And basically, his parents start, hanging out, partying, all sorts of other stuff, and they eventually come across, kind of a weird pull-through. Kirishima and Bakugo pretty much start, having a party, and pretty much Dabi comes to a realization that, he can't enter the house. Dabi starts trying to get into the house any other way, but he understands that, he's a vampire, he has to be invited in. So, pretty much, Kirishima walks down, seeing Dabi at the front door, and Kirishima saying, what are you doing out there? Come in, come on. Pretty much Dabi saying, thank you, smirking a little bit, walking into the house, walking around. Him fighting about two girls, and him walking out, pretty much him saying that this is going to be a good night. After that night, Dabi feeds and kills both of the girls. But we skip out to Deku. Now, Deku was actually left behind by Shigaraki and Dabi, and Deku was in the house. Now, Deku was walking up the stairs saying, Kirishima, pretty much upstairs on his phone, pretty much, looking at TikToks like that. So Dabi was was pretty much gone, and Deku started sliming around, bumping into pretty much Kirishima. Kirishima was confused, picking up his feet, looking around, seeing he was on top of something, stepping on something, and saw some sort of slime. Kirishima said, "A slime in my house? I didn't even know slimes were in Japan anymore." Pretty much poking Deku. Deku saying, "Don't poke me." Deku, explained to him, "My friends left me and I have nowhere else to go." Kirishima says, "Well, take me to your friend's house." Now, Kirishima pretty much grabs Deku, hits him on his back, and Kirishima starts sprinting off with his wolf speed, him just running as fast as a wolf. Him running to pretty much Dabi's cabin. Now, pretty much Shigaraki did know time magic, so he reversed time on the cabin, making the cabin a lot more neater, looking like. We arrive at the cabin, and Dabi is basically in the cabin after feeding up two girls upstairs, going downstairs, and pretty much hearing a knock at the front door. He opens the door, and he sees Kirishima. Kirishima and Dabi meet eye contact and say, "Dabi?" Kirishima says, "I brought your slime back, and, you're in Japan?" Dabi says, "I've been gone for a couple of years out of Japan, but now I'm back." Dabi pretty much saying to leave now. Kirishima says, "No, I'm not leaving. Your parents, your mom is worried sick." Dabi says, "I knew you hesitated for a second, because we both know my father doesn't love me. He only loves his court children, not his vampire child." Basically, Dabi explained that he was the only person in his family that was born a vampire, other than his mother. So his mother, he started going on about how his father hates him, and how he was a neglected one. He was the most neglected one, and he was treated like nothing. Dabi starts getting angry, saying, "Okay, so you gotta leave now, Kirishima." Now, him hearing another knock at the door, seeing Bakugo enter the room. Bakugo enters the room and starts saying, "So sniffed out Kirishima and I came here. And here you are. Your parents, your mom, and pretty much Dabi says, you too. You both know my father doesn't love me. So why are you trying to bring me back to the house? I am a real vampire. Vampire blood? The government's trying to feed us blood that our ancestors hated? It's fake blood. It's not even real. We need real blood to become strong and powerful. You're just killing yourself slowly." Dabi pretty much starts going on about, how you're weak and you can't help yourself. Pretty much blah 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 other stuff. Bakugo gets angry and says, "Weak? Say it to my face." Dabi says, "I'll say it to your face one last time. You're weak." Bakugo gets angry and starts fighting with Dabi. Dabi tries to throw him around the house, into the stairs, into the trees outside, throwing him through the window, him jumping outside, and Bakugo and Dabi would straight up just be fighting at this point, going head to head. Dabi throwing huge amounts of fire magic towards Bakugo dodging most of it, being faster than the average vampire because, he's Dracula's grandson. Him drop kicking Dabi into a wall. Into a tree. Dabi gets back up, throwing a shard of wood at Bakugo. Bakugo sees that, that almost hit Bakugo's heart. The shard of wood going into Bakugo's kidney. Bakugo rips it out, saying, "You could have killed me." And Dabi's saying, "Well, who's saying I didn't want to?" But Dabi running straight towards Bakugo. Them started going toe to toe. Them pretty much beating the living snot out of each other. But them getting stopped when they're about to throw a huge punch towards each other at the same time. Both of their fists getting stopped in pretty much dead point range. Pretty much their fists getting stopped and their fists getting kind of hurt when Deku steps in his human form, stopping both of them. Deku steps in and stops both of them and says to cut it out, and saying, to stop. Dabi throws another punch towards Deku, but Deku dodges it and punches Dabi in the gut. Gut checks Dabi so hard Dabi fades out of consciousness, and Bakugo says, "Wow, didn't know how strong slime could be." Deku saying, "Stop being racist," pretty much slapping the holy grail of slaps out of Bakugo, sending Bakugo through two different trees. making Bakugo get knocked unconscious as well. Them both being in the house, Dabi on the couch, and Bakugo on the floor next to the couch. Pretty much Kirishima and Deku talking. Deku, still in his human form, I just didn't want to edit this picture again. So, Deku starts, talking to Kirishima. Kirishima starts saying that was crazy, and like you should have stopped the fight between two powerful vampires with just one foul swoop. Pretty much, Deku says, yeah, but I could have killed them. Pretty much, Kirishima says, what do you mean? Deku says, I absorbed some of werewolf DNA. Pretty much I have the ability to one-shot vampires with a bite or a scratch because I have some of the werewolf instant kill virus in my veins. Pretty much Bakugo saying, you know what that would do to a vampire. It slowly decays them from the inside, makes their blood dry up, and pretty much every movement they make, every breathe, or even breath they take, feels like sandpaper is rubbing against all their internal organs. Then their eyes go completely dry, and then they start to just die and deflate. And they just start to hallucinate the last couple minutes they're alive, and that's it. Saying, it's agony for a vampire to be killed that way. And most of the time when a vampire is bit, they mainly want to get themselves killed by a stake before they even feel that much pain. So, Deku says, yeah, but if I ever have to use it in a case of emergency, I will. Kirishima says, okay, pretty much them being interrupted when Bakugo wakes up. Bakugo wakes up asking, Kirishima, what happened? Kirishima says Deku gut checked you and Bakugo. Well, mainly gut checked Dabi and then threw you to, Kingdom Come through 2 different trees, knocking you out. Pretty much Dabi wakes up as well, saying, you should have never done that. Him firing up a fireball, saying, I'm going to kill you both. Bakugo saying, chill out, and them about to fight again. But Deku steps in and says, stop fighting before I have to take you guys both out. Pretty much, Dabi says, whatever, get out of my house. Him hearing another doorbell at the another doorbell ring. Him saying, if it's another person, I swear I'm going to kill them. Him running over to the front door, opening it up, getting met with a nasty right hook by none other than the demon that Deku was locked up with. Pretty much Riez, or the demon, Riez is the demon's name. Pretty much the demon walks in and says, Deku? Deku jumps out in cheer and says, Riez-kun, Riez-chan, whatever it is. Basically, he starts hugging her and she says, slow down. Pretty much her saying, I trapped on your scent and you guys led me to this cabin. And Dabi's pretty much knocked out on the floor. And Bakugo's basically on the floor, still just laying there. Not knocked out, but just, still in pain from Deku throwing him through 2 trees. Bakugo pretty much starts flirting with Riez, saying, so, what's your name? She says, I'm Riez. Deku just said it. He starts flirting more and more, pretty much pushing it a little bit, and Riez says, back off. Pretty much pushing Bakugo. Normally, if a normal girl pushed Bakugo like this, the motion Riez went, it wouldn't really do anything, but Riez is a demon, a very powerful one at that, an old one. So she sent Bakugo flying into the kitchen, pretty much knocking him out, him hitting his head on the kitchen table. Now, basically Kirishima says, hey, I'm Kirishima. Pretty much, saying, hello, blah, blah, saying, I like your hair, I love your hair. Pretty much him pointing to his own hair. Riez just chuckling a little bit, saying, you too. Blah, 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 them talking, Deku talking about, his day, or like the months it's been, and blah, blah, blah. Now, Dabi wakes up eventually, still on the floor, pretty much Riez saying, so where are you gonna stay? Pretty much Kirishima says, I'm pretty sure Dabi doesn't have a problem with it. Dabi is trying to speak, but Bakugo pretty much, Kirishima Kirishima pretty much twists Dabi's ankle, saying let them stay, whispering it into Dabi's ear. Dabi says okay, 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 and they're able to stay. So the next morning, Kirishima and Bakugo leave, but they do come back and basically say what's up, y'all. Dabi in upstairs, basically him waking up, seeing pretty much Deku butt naked in the kitchen. Dabi says what's going on here, saying, to straight up, get some clothes. Deku walks pretty much closer to Dabi and says Dabi yells out, put some clothes on, and pretty much Dabi sees that Deku doesn't have anything there. Dabi says, what the? And Deku says, oh, I haven't chosen sex yet. Pretty much Dabi says, well, just pick a male. You already look the part. Deku says okay, and pretty much grows a thing. Pretty much, and Bakugo sees this and says, oh my gosh. Pretty much, Bakugo feeling a little bit inferior for a second. Now, Dabi looks at Bakugo and says, what's the problem? And pretty much Bakugo says, Bakugo stutters and says, Deku, put some clothes on now. Deku pretty much puts some shorts on and pretty much sees Ares walks down and Ares has some sort of robe. Pretty much, pretty much Dabi gets angry and says, you aren't supposed to have my robe. Pretty much saying, take it off now. Pretty much she says, oh, Ria says, make me take it off. Pretty much Dabi conjures up some fire magic and says, I'm gonna burn you alive. Pretty much her blowing out the fireball Dabi's making. Dabi says, what the? And pretty much Dabi goes for a punch towards Riaz, but Riaz grabs it and throws him out of the window. Him getting angry, saying, is that all you got? Pretty much Deku. Basically, Dabi gets up and pretty much says, is that all you got? Deku gets outside and says to chill out, and pretty much Deku goes for a huge punch towards Deku. And Deku's fast enough to dodge it, but Kirishima steps in the way and grabs it and says to chill out Dabi and to let it go. Dabi says, did you just grab my punch? Kirishima says, yeah. And Dabi says, you're a lesser being. You aren't supposed to even touch me. Kirishima says, what did you say? And Dabi says, you're a lesser being. You're a little mutt. You're supposed to touch me. I'm going to kill you for this. Pretty much going for a scratch at and pretty much Kirishima's face. Kirishima steps back, but is unable to dodge it. But Bakugo steps in, grabs Dabi's scratch or punch or smack, whatever it was, and pretty much grabs it, saying to back off, pushing Dabi into a tree. Dabi gets up and throws a stake from the tree straight at the chest of pretty much Bakugo. But Bakugo, the stake gets stopped by Deku. Deku grabs it and throws it at Dabi's leg. Dabi yelling out in pain, falling down to the ground. Dabi looking at them saying, you brought up in my house, in my time, in my sacred place, and you take it over? I'm going to kill each and every one of you. Dabi turned into a bat, flying into the top of the house in the attic. Him hatching up a plan to take down everybody. So basically, they go up the attic trying to find Dabi, but Dabi's gone, and Dabi has flown off to another one of his cabins or locations in the forest. Pretty much, Dabi goes to his house, goes to his cabin that's pretty much sun powered, going into his cabin, pretty much locking all the doors, and hatching up a plan for his next great scheme. Now, basically, what else is happening for the rest of the group? Bakugo and Kirishima were punished because of their party they threw, but didn't go back to the house to stop. So it went out of control, and everything in the house was broken and stuff like that. But some of the family relics were still intact, so Kirishima wasn't as badly punished as he would have been if any of the family relics from, Silverback were broken, including the silver sword. the silver sword that can only kill a vampire, or Dracula's. Now, Draculas are really harder to kill than the normal vampires. Only way you can kill a Dracula is to cut their head off with a silver blade, or to completely get rid of their body, like every ash. Like, not even ashes can be left of their bodies. So it's basically impossible for them to burn them without leaving any ashes of their body left. Now, basically, that's basically it. So, hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys, sorry, wrong script. This video is supposed to be a lot more longer, so yeah, guys, I'm not gonna make it off here. But if you guys want to take a break, get out this video, get a snack or something, or if you already have a snack, get off this video, watch a movie or a video, then come back and continue the video. Now, if you still want to know what's happening, just continue. Now, since Bakugo and Kirishima were punished, they were sent home and they weren't able to go outside. But Dabi was concocting a plan for the next full moon. The next full moon was about 2 days later, and it's been 2 days. So Deku and Rias have been living at the house, basically finding trick doors, and also finding a bunch of dead bodies at the bottom of the pretty much basement, seeing them mainly drained of blood. Rias saying, "What a blood-sucking leech." Blah blah blah. Pretty much them cleaning up the house and them taking it over. Now, pretty much, Deku at this point has already had has chosen a ginger, and pretty much has started to get, sexual feelings for Rias. Now, basically, Deku hears a knock at the door, and it's none other than Bakugo. Bakugo says, "So, basically, guys, I'm going to be gone for a pretty long time because I grounded, but also I'm going to UA. Deku says, "What is UA?" And pretty much Bakugo says, "You don't know what UA?" Deku walks over to Bakugo and pulls a chunk of his hair out. Bakugo is saying, "What the heck are you doing?" Not a chunk, but like a strand of Bakugo's hair. He pretty much eats it and says, "I got some knowledge from you." Now, UA is like a school for supernaturals and superpowered quirk people. Pretty much Bakugo says, "Yes. What is it to you?" Deku says, "I think I want to try out." Pretty much Bakugo says, "You try out. Whatever." Pretty much Bakugo gets told by Deku that, I'm going to become a hero because I think it's a pretty good idea. It could probably get the government off my chest if I'm, a hero. And also, if I become a hero, I could possibly, become a big shot, make a name for slimes. So basically, Deku says, "I want to become a hero." Bakugo says, "You become a hero." "Okay, you can become a hero when I become Santa Claus," about to walk out the house. And Deku stops him and says, "Tell me where UA is now." Bakugo says, "Why should I tell you that?" And Ria says, "You should." Pretty much giving Bakugo a death stare. Bakugo says, "Okay, whatever." Pretty much giving them an address or a location to UA, saying, "Meet you there in 2 days." Pretty much him walking off. Now, it was a full moon before UA and Chikazam started, so Kirishima started transforming. Kirishima transformed because their family has cages spread out from their house so they can, transform separately. So Kirishima transformed that night, waking up in the cage in the morning, seeing pretty much Dabi on top of his cage, saying, "Well, this is going to be fun." His eyes going completely black and his fangs popping out. Pretty much Bakugo came over to Kirishima's house, opened the door, and pretty much Kirishima's parents said pretty much, what happened. Now, at this point, what happened is Bakugo was coming over to try to, tell Kirishima, we're going to go to Intrigue exams with Deku and Rias right behind Bakugo. They walk in and see Bakugo bleeding and bruised up on the couch. Pretty much his parents saying, what happened. Pretty much, Bakugo and Deku and Ria saying what happened. Pretty much they start saying that some kid or from one of your friends, Dabi, pretty much jumped my son. Now, basically, Kirishima says, my wolf healing would do some of the damage away, but still it hurts a lot. Pretty much Dabi kicked the whole made the holiest of holy of beatings. I mean, like, he beat Kirishima so hard, Kirishima lost about 50% of all of his bones. Shattered all of his bones, but if Kirishima wasn't supernatural, he would be paralyzed at this point. So Kirishima says, it would take months for my healing to heal me completely. I'm probably gonna miss out in UA entrance exams. Deku says, not really. I have some healing magic that I've learned from Rias. Now, Rias did teach Deku a lot of magic spells as they were stuck in the vase for 1,000 years, so it's nothing better else to do but to teach Deku. So Deku knew about a little bit of healing magic, a very powerful enough of healing magic. Healing Bakugo. Healing Kirishima to a point of being completely healed. Kirishima did have a little bit of pain, but it was completely healed. His body didn't have any physical pain, it's just that, he still felt pain. But, he was still in full strength, so he got back up and said, okay, I think I'm ready. They go out, and pretty much Kirishima's mom says to be careful and to have this on you. And pretty much Kirishima's mom gives Kirishima pretty much a wooden bullet, a steak bullet, saying, a steak knife, pretty much like a pocket knife to kill vampires, pretty much saying to keep it on you at all times. Blah, blah, blah. Pretty much, Kirishima said, I don't need this, but I'll take it to make you, feel safer, Mom. Pretty much, Kirishima and the rest of the group pretty much walk out of the house, going to the entry exams. Now, all their written exams do go the same. Now, well, Kirishima's and Bakugo's written exam do the same. Deku did get some knowledge from Dabi and pretty much Bakugo. And he did get enough knowledge to get a pretty good score. Probably like about 3 times higher than Dabi's score. I mean, Denki's score. And Ria's score was average, enough to get in, or enough to pass. So for the, entry exams, the physical exam, they got started. So basically they got the same talk from President Mike, but Rias and Deku talking in the back, but talking and whispering because they have, common sense not to be rude. So they start talking, and pretty much Deku starts, flirting with Rias a little bit, getting a little bit of flirting technique or memories from Dabi picking up girls to, feed on them. And also him picking up vampire girls for him to, normally get a date. Or what you get at the end of a date. So basically, Deku first with Rias a little bit. Rias saying, who taught you these lines? Saying, they're pretty good. Blah, blah, them talking a little bit more. Rias getting some sexual feelings for Deku as well. So they get interrupted by Ida. Ida saying, to knock it off, blah, 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 chopping his hand. Rias says to leave me alone, leave us alone. Pretty much her giving Ida the death stare. Ida steps back and says, okay, I'll leave you be. Him walking off. Bakugo smirks and chuckles a little bit, but President Mike stops and says, that's it, and get ready. They get ready, and they get told there's no, countdowns in a real fight. So they let everybody go on, and all of them start running off. They're running off and taking out robots. Deku starts running off and taking out robots, pretty much seeing, pretty much Kirishima transform into some sort of werewolf hybrid. That's not a true werewolf form, but enough werewolf to make him a lot more stronger. Because werewolves can transform into a day form during the daytime, or during a normal night. So basically, pretty much Kirishima starts ripping and running, pretty much kicking robots into walls, going around and around. Pretty much, Bakugo pretty much just flying around in bat form, or in like a swarm of bats, him going around, taking down more robots, him jumping on top of robots, building up enough kinetic force to kick him into walls. Now for Rias just used her fire magic to burn robots with nonchalantly, not really using any power, or not really using a lot of effort, just burning them alive, or disintegrating robots. Now basically Deku saw Kirishima and pretty much Bakugo's powers being used and said, maybe I can use that to my advantage, since he has Bakugo and vampire DNA from Dabi as well, and Bakugo also has werewolf DNA. He just decides to mix it up. Deku transforms to a vampire and werewolf hybrid with both the powers, seen as a pretty good form. Now it basically looks like this, but just more genuine and pretty much transparent. So yeah, and not a lot of fire. So Earth Deku starts running off and starts, running around, kicking robots in the ground, throwing them into buildings, ripping them apart, and pretty much taking down robots upon robots, taking more robots than he did than before and ever could. Pretty much Deku going rapid, taking down so many robots to a point where other, contestants can't even get robots anymore because Deku's taking too much of the robots and taking them out too fast. And, the school wasn't predicting a student to have so much strength. And pretty much the teachers were kind of confused, but they started looking up Deku's race. And they saw that Deku was a slime. All Might was confused, saying that I never knew such a strong slime. Now, pretty much Deku saw the whole entire swarm thing with Bakugo replayed in his head, and pretty much started to break his body in multiple places, and pretty much making a whole swarm or pack of miniature red slime wolves. Him running around in a whole pack, pretty much ravaging robots. Him splitting up, taking out more robots faster and quicker and multiple times. Him also running up against the Zeraplanner, seeing Ochaku under some rubble. Now Deku doesn't actually do anything to save Ochaku because he sees that Ochaku is human, and and we didn't explain this in the beginning, but Deku actually has a flashback of a group of humans that actually killed his slime family. Now Deku was about a child when his family was killed by slimes. Now, this was before Deku was locked up in the vase, and before Deku's father thought it would be a good idea to put Deku in the vase for his own power safety. Now, Deku's father was killed about 2 minutes after, exactly 2 minutes after Deku was put in the vase, and before Deku was sealed in the vase. Deku saw everything safe in the vase, but saw everything about his family being slaughtered and everything, them being pretty much taken out and killed. Now Deku had a flashback and pretty much growled and ran off from the girl, seeing there's no point in saving her. But Bakugo steps in, flying in there, grabbing Ochaku and pulling her out the way, getting her to safety. Bakugo saw the whole thing, seeing Deku and seeing Ochaku just walking off. Deku stops Deku pretty much runs off, and Bakugo stops Deku, saying, "What was that about?" Deku transforms into his full main wolf form, not being back in his human form, just being in his whole form, or his new form, pretty much saying, "I did what any sane person would do. I ran away." Bakugo saying, "No, not that. You let that girl die, or you almost let that girl die." He said, "First of all, if it's not hurting me, it's not hurting me. First of all, if she wanted to stay alive, she could have helped herself, or protected herself, or be better. I just let it happen. It's not my problem that humans are weak." Pretty much, Bakugo says humans aren't weak. Pretty much him saying that my mother was a quirk. My mother has a quirk, and she's not weak. Pretty much Deku saying, "Yeah, your mother's a quirk user, but she is still human." Him about to walk off, but Deku being stopped by Bakugo saying, "You can't just be so cruel towards humans. What have they ever done to you?" And Deku pretty much gets angry and says, "What have they ever done to me?" Him yelling, saying that they killed my whole family. They murdered them in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything about it. So you want to know why I hate humans? It's because of that single fact, that they're all monsters, and they think we are." Him walking off, being super angry. Deku getting stopped again by Bakugo. Bakugo getting his hand slapped away from Deku. Deku saying, "Leave me alone before I kill you." Bakugo saying, "You're really going to kill me?" It takes a lot more than a vampire bite to kill Dracula. It hurts a lot, but I won't die from no vampire bite. Deku says, "I never said I was going to vampire bites you, it's not like I can't just make a silver blade. Bakugo says, you wouldn't dare. Deku says, try me. Him walking off and ominous music playing in the background. Now I get switched back to pretty much Dobby. Dobby pretty much on rooftops, seeing everything. Dobby saying this is gonna be fun. To torment all these people for the rest of eternity. I'm really gonna have great fun with this. Now we are end off there. We end off there, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Now part 2 will be focusing on the first day of UA, and also the second day of UA, but also how Dobby would torment everybody. So I hope you guys enjoy, like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Now, after this video, I will be uploading soon part 1 to What If Ben 10 was in Invincible, or What If Ben 10 was in CW. Now, hope you guys liked the video, and subscribe. And as always, guys, comment down below what you want to see next, or any suggestions. So, bye guys, see you later, deuces, have a blessed day.